into the past that was supposed to be our future. When the Japanese suggested building a multifunction Polis, some dreamed of flying around like the Jetsons, but the reality was much more down to earth.
Hello everyone. Today we're going to make a multifunction Polis. Can you say that? Very good.
In the 90s, if you were parodied on Fast Forward, you'd made it. But realising the MFP proved to be anything but child's play.
Let's start making our multifunction Polis.
This land at Gilman is where it was going to be built. Exactly what was the confusing part, but the state government's dream sounded very 21st century.
It wants a sort of live-in laboratory. There'd be a world university with students from Asia, Europe and America. There'd be high-tech industries involved with space, communications and computers.
A snappy fly-through showed a monorail, and some thought we'd soon be living like the Jetsons.
You could never deliver the Jetsons a cartoon, for goodness sake, right?
Former Senator Chris Schott had the job of looking after the MFP under Paul Keating.
And as a South Australian, we'd already won the bid to have it, so I was quite optimistic and positive about being the minister for the MFP.
Adelaide was chosen for the project only after the Gold Coast knocked it back.
Adelaide is quite well known in Japan, and when MFP is built, Adelaide will probably be better known than Sydney.
But it faced a number of significant hurdles. The Japanese economy tanked. There were environmental challenges.
This whole area is waterlogged. There's seawater just below the surface. So in the event of an earthquake, some experts are saying this ground will become a liquefied bog and buildings will sink.
There was also anti-Japanese sentiment to contend with.
Some people in the community saw it as a Japanese enclave, and that was the main argument pushed against it.
But its backers pushed ahead.
Our experience has been that anyone getting close to the project and its concept becomes very supportive of it.
Multifunction Polis or an MFP. We don't know what it does, but it's good for you and me.
But after a decade of trying to make a go of it, the MFP was killed off in 1997.
The money, on occasions and different circumstances, wasted along the way was a disgrace and an embarrassment.
If that had been built and developed 30 years ago, we would now have an asset in South Australia that would make us an international centre for, in particular, marine research.
The future will have to wait.
Does your MFP look like my MFP? If not, don't worry. No one really knows what they look like anyway.
Make us an international centre for, in particular, marine research.
The future
The Japanese idea, and 80% of the city's residents would be foreigners. A decision on the multifunction policy is expected in June, but as Jill Singer reports, some people are questioning whether it should be here at all.
Life in the 21st century. A brave new world run by nuclear power. Radioactive waste buried deep in our soil. Citizens tracked by remote control devices. Scientists in control of fertility. This is the dream some of our scientists hope could be made a reality by government. This is the story of the unleashed passion of our government and business for money and power, and of our scientists for the chance to rupture the barriers that usually restrain them. The dream began to emerge 3 years ago at the Japanese Ministry for International Trade and Industry. What about building an entire new futuristic city on Australian soil, suggested the Japanese minister to his Australian counterpart. Senator John Button liked the idea.
We're supporting a feasibility study into its potential. We think it's a very good and exciting idea. We've got to be looking to the future here in Australia.
Australia is an English-speaking country, a nice climate, and Australia is a multiracial country, so we can get used to the international way of thinking.
The Japanese christened the city the Multifunction Polis. The MFP would house elite professionals living and working in a 21st century hub of science, technology and leisure facilities.
まさに理想的な生活をエンジョイすることができます。
Nobody in Australia knew what Japan meant when talk began of fifth sphere living. But reminiscent of a flock of imperial concubines, our state governments immediately clamoured to be chosen by the great and wealthy one. The climate is right for an MFP in Melbourne. The New South Wales government is committed to the success of the MFP project. Take me, I'm yours, said the Western Australian, South Australian and Queensland governments.
These 5 proposed sites show that there is extensive available land capable of supporting the establishment of a multifunction polis.
Australia wants their money, but what do the Japanese want? After visiting Japanese officials working on the MFP, Professor Gavin McCormack thinks he knows.
The benefit, I think, to Japan is that this, for the long term, it would be a symbolic project which would consolidate Japanese economic domination through the Western Pacific region along a Tokyo-Sydney or Tokyo-Melbourne axis.
To kick off the feasibility studies, $1 million was chipped in by these Japanese business leaders. This was matched by the Japanese and Australian governments and Australian industry. $4 million in all, a figure which was to grow. A vast organisational structure developed in Australia, involving bureaucrats, academics and business heavyweights. They put a lot down on paper. The 7:30 report has obtained much of it. A joint Japan-Australia steering committee was set up in July 1988, headed by the chairman of the ANZ Bank, Will Bailey. The following November, a private company, MFP Australia Research, was formed to harness and develop industry proposals. The company reports to the Joint Steering Committee. The following November, a private company, MFP Australia Research, was formed to harness and develop industry proposals. The company reports to the Joint Steering Committee. At Bailey's behest, Clem Doherty, a principal of McKinsey, he's been researching the work of 18 think tanks, set up by the private MFP company to generate industry proposals. The think tank members include eminent scientists, business leaders and government officials.
The implications are absolutely massive. They're talking about genetic implanting of devices in your body so you can be in constant contact with the outside world. It's going to be a democratic process, they say, because you can turn it off if you don't want to be in contact. But they also talk about this as being possible to monitor crowd control.
It was decided our future energy needs would best be met by developing a strong nuclear power industry. Australia should establish itself as a world centre for uranium management, digging it up, enriching it, installing nuclear power plants. Of the 11 construction companies supporting the feasibility studies from the Japanese side, 5 are involved in the nuclear industry. So, is